but it was also highly maneuverable at very slow speeds, as this rare Russian film shows. It could climb up to 19,000 meters, that's over 2 miles high. It had a range of 4,000 kilometers, or over 2,000 miles, and it could stay in the air for about 5 hours, with a maximum weapons load of 8 tons. Between 1986 and 1989, a highly modified version, the P-42, challenged the American F-15 specially stripped Streak Eagle for a number of world records. The P-42 was so clean that with its uprated engines, it had to be tethered to a military vehicle using twin cables and an electronic lock release, as the standard brakes simply couldn't hold it back. The P-42 set a total of no less than 27 new world records. Its rate of climb was 213 meters, or 700 feet per second. The Su-27 had an integral airframe with the wings and fuselage blended together to give it more lift and less drag. With its relatively fuel-efficient Saturn Lyulka turbofans, its aerodynamic airframe and room for more internal fuel, the flanker had exceptional endurance for an aircraft of its type. It had 2 powerful horizontal stabilizers, flaperons, drooped leading edges, and a fly-by-wire system to improve both its performance and maneuverability. The Su-27 was designed to be unstable and run by its computers, but the fly-by-wire system was so efficient that it meant that the pilot controlled the aircraft in exactly the same way as a stable one. The same system controlled the so-called high-lift devices, raising the aircraft's all-important lift-to-drag ratio during a combat maneuver, again being greater at a greater angle of attack. It also made sure that the pilot couldn't overstress the aircraft, whatever he did. This not only protected it from too high angles of attack, but meant that the pilot didn't have to worry about it, which gave him a psychological edge in a war situation. And it also meant that he couldn't get into an unwanted spin or overload the computer system. The fly-by-wire control system had 4 extra channels, so that if any of its components failed, another channel would automatically take over, leaving the pilot free to get on with the job in hand. Victor Churkin was a combat pilot, so what did he think of the flanker?
The Sukhoi Su-27 is very maneuverable, and its minimal radius of turn is quite comparable with that of piston-engine fighters of the World War II. The fighter's good cockpit visibility and small deflections of its control surfaces make possible to pilot it confidently at small altitudes. I always pilot a fighter with pleasure. I find it hard to believe that an aircraft whose weight exceeds 20 tons is so controllable.
Because the Su-27 was designed to land on rough terrain, its engines are protected from any stones or rubble by these simple anti-ingestion protective screens, which work totally automatically during the taxiing, takeoff and landing phases. Its twin engines are set well apart with an integral fire protection system between them. The wide clearances between the fuel tanks and intake ducts stop the risk of any fire spreading. The early versions of the aircraft had their fuel tanks filled with polyurethane foam. This is a dramatic example of a fuel tank filled with foam and shot at by a round of ammunition. The same again, a round of ammunition fired at an unprotected fuel tank. All these protective measures meant that the flanker should survive if it was hit in combat. The engines were designed to be easy to maintain, with jobs like changing the first stage blades of both a compressor and a turbine right on the airfield, without having to send the whole engine to the repair plant. Two search and track systems were coupled to a look-down pulse Doppler radar, an infrared target finder with a laser rangefinder, and a helmet-mounted sight system, which allows the pilot to aim his weapons at the target without turning the aircraft. A navigation system and an automatic flight control system means that the aircraft can take off in bad weather, day or night, with a 200-foot cloud base and 2,500-foot visibility. There are 10 hardpoints under the aircraft for weapons or stores. Early versions carried 4 Archer air-to-air and 6 Alamo missiles. Apart from the underwing stores, Flanker has an internal 30mm cannon with a potent 200 rounds of ammunition. The cannon is linked to the target designator with a rangefinder which is said to help in close combat. With its variety of missiles, the Flanker can fight from a distance or at close quarters. One of its requirements was to escort the Su-24 Fencer bombers to their targets. While the squadrons took off, the Aleutian A-50 AWACS got itself into position to control the battle. The flankers led the bombers towards the target area, guided by the AWACS, and literally blasted away through any enemy attack using their range of missiles. Until the way was clear for the bombers to drop their load. Even by 1987, the West hadn't had a good look at the Su-27. But one of its first encounters turned out to be too close for comfort. A Norwegian P-3 Orion patrol plane met 2 flankers. One of the flankers got too close and hit one of the Orion's props, damaging both aircraft with bits of the prop flying through the Orion's fuselage. Now the West had seen Russia's mystery aircraft, its aviation industries were suddenly spurred into action. 1989, the Paris Air Show was the first time that the Western crowds were to witness for themselves how true the rumors had been about the Su-27. Was it as agile and potent as they'd been led to believe? Test pilot Viktor Pugachev left them in no doubt at all with his dazzling display. He pulled his 22-ton aircraft straight off the runway into a vertical figure of 8 within an 800-meter frame. Pugachev stunned the crowd with a maneuver never seen in the West before. Pugachev's Cobra, a move that he'd invented himself and that was to become an international trademark for the Sukhoi. The aircraft flew straight and level, then pitched its nose up to 120 degrees. Pugachev then pushed the stick forward and into level.